A young law student found himself entangled in a web of deceit and desperation when he married a 71-year-old widow. The skies over the small Texas college town had been gray for a week, the rain turning the streets into rivers. Alex Carter walked through the puddles, his backpack heavy on his shoulder, his mind weighed down by the debts left by his late father. At 23, he was struggling to finish law school, work a part-time job, and support his family. The world felt like it was closing in on him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, jolting him from his thoughts. "Alex Carter speaking," he answered. A calm, authoritative voice replied, "Mr. Carter, this is Victoria Morgan. I'd like to meet with you. It's regarding your financial situation." Alex frowned. "I'm sorry, who are you? How do you know about—" "I know enough," she interrupted smoothly. "Let's meet at Morgan's Bistro, 7 p.m. It's important." The call ended before Alex could protest. Curious but uneasy, he made his way to the upscale cafe. The rain had turned into a downpour by the time he arrived, his jacket soaked through. Stepping inside, he was greeted by the warm glow of the bistro and the aroma of fresh coffee. At a corner table sat Victoria Morgan, a striking woman with silver hair styled to perfection, dressed in a tailored suit that exuded wealth. "Alex," she greeted, gesturing for him to sit, her tone calm yet commanding. Alex hesitated before taking the seat opposite her. "Ms. Morgan, what's this about?" he asked. "Straight to the point. Good," she said, sipping her tea. "Alex, I know about your debts, the ones your father left behind. I know you're barely scraping by. I'm here to offer a solution." Alex's brows furrowed. "And what would that be?" She set down her cup, her piercing blue eyes meeting his. "Marry me." The words hung in the air, heavy and surreal. Alex blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said, her voice steady. "This isn't about romance. It's a business arrangement. I'll pay off all your debts, ensure your financial security, and in return, you'll be my husband." Alex let out a disbelieving laugh. "You're serious?" "Why me? You don't even know me." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "Precisely. You're young, unattached, and desperate enough to consider this. I don't need love, Alex. I need a companion. Someone to share my name, my estate, and nothing more. Think of it as a contract." Alex shook his head, his mind racing. "This is insane. What's in it for you?" Her expression softened for the first time. "I've spent my life alone, Alex. I have no children, no family left. I want companionship, even if it's just for appearances, and I need control of my legacy. A husband will help solidify that." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "I can't. I need time to think." "Of course," she replied coolly, "but don't take too long. The offer won't stand forever." Alex walked home in a daze, the rain soaking through his clothes. That night he sat at the kitchen table with his mother, her pale face etched with worry. The cost of her treatments had drained them both, and his younger sister's tuition loomed like a dark cloud. "Alex," his mother said softly after he explained Victoria's proposition, "I know it sounds unthinkable, but if she's willing to help, maybe it's worth considering." Alex stared at his hands, torn between pride and desperation. "You're asking me to marry a woman I don't love just to solve our problems." "I'm asking you to save yourself," she said, her voice trembling. "To save us." The following morning, Alex returned to the bistro. Victoria was already there, her demeanor as composed as before. "You've decided?" she asked, not looking up from her tablet. Alex took a deep breath. "I'll do it." She smiled faintly, setting down her tablet. "Good. The arrangements will be made immediately." A week later, Alex stood in a small courthouse wearing a suit Victoria had provided. The ceremony was quiet, witnessed only by Victoria's lawyer and a notary. As they exchanged vows, unease tightened in his chest. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Victoria turned to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome to your new life, Mr. Carter." As they left the courthouse in a light drizzle, Alex caught his reflection in a puddle and wondered, have I saved my family or sold my soul? The gates to Victoria Morgan's estate creaked open as Alex's cab rolled up the long driveway. The house loomed ahead, a sprawling mansion that could pass for a museum. Its towering columns and pristine stone facade exuded old money, but its windows seemed dark and lifeless. Alex stepped out, suitcase in hand, feeling like a visitor in someone else's dream, or perhaps nightmare. Victoria greeted him in the foyer, her demeanor as polished as ever. "Welcome, Mr. Carter," she said, the formal address sending a shiver down Alex's spine. "I trust you'll find everything to your satisfaction. Dinner is at 7. He nodded mutely, following a housekeeper to his room. It was opulent, a king-sized bed, antique furnishings, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. Despite its luxury, the room felt cold, untouched by human warmth. That evening, Alex sat stiffly at the long dining table. Victoria presided at the other end, dressed impeccably in a silk blouse and pearls. The food was extravagant, prepared by an unseen chef and served by silent staff. "I trust you're settling in," Victoria said, cutting into her filet mignon with surgical precision. "It's different," Alex replied cautiously. "This place is huge. Feels like I'll get lost." Victoria smirked. "You'll get used to it or you won't. Either way, you're here." Alex bristled at her bluntness. "You didn't mention much about your late husband before." Victoria's knife paused mid-cut. She dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "He was a businessman, like your father. Their paths crossed once or twice." Her tone darkened. "But as you might imagine, not all encounters end well." "What do you mean?" She fixed him with sharp eyes. "Let's just say unfinished business has a way of lingering." She lifted her wineglass. "But that's in the past. You'll soon understand why I chose you." Her cryptic words left Alex uneasy. After dinner, he wandered the halls of the estate. The house was eerily quiet except for the faint creak of floorboards underfoot. He passed several locked doors, their brass handles gleaming in the dim light. Each one seemed to whisper secrets he wasn't meant to know. As the days passed, Alex grew more unsettled. The staff avoided eye contact, speaking in hushed tones when they thought he wasn't listening. He overheard whispered conversations that made his stomach twist. Why him? Does he even know? She never does anything without a reason. He'll figure it out eventually. They always do. One evening, while pacing the library, Alex spotted an ornate key on Victoria's desk among scattered papers. It gleamed under the desk lamp, its intricate design catching his eye. His gaze swept the empty room. Heart pounding, he reached for it. The key was unexpectedly heavy and cool to the touch. Could this unlock one of those mysterious doors? He glanced toward the hallway where shadows danced against the walls, then slipped the key into his pocket, his breath quickening. That night, lying in his luxurious yet suffocating room, Alex turned the key over in his hands. A million questions swirled in his mind, but one dominated all others. What was Victoria hiding, and why had she really chosen him? The mansion lay silent as Alex crept down the hall, the key pressed against his thigh like a lead weight. His pulse raced as he approached the door he'd noticed earlier, its ornate handle gleaming in the moonlight that streamed through the windows. After a furtive glance over his shoulder, he inserted the key. The lock clicked softly in the silence, sending a shiver down his spine. He pushed the door open slowly. The room beyond was frozen in time. Dusty furniture and faded wallpaper surrounded him. On a table, photographs in tarnished silver frames captured moments from happier days. Victoria as a young woman, a man who must have been her late husband, and an unrecognizable couple. But it was the stack of papers on the desk that drew his attention. Alex flipped through them, his eyes widening. Legal documents detailed failed business deals between Victoria's husband and Alex's father. A particular letter, written in sharp, slanted handwriting, accused Alex's father of fraud. "You ruined everything. My family was left with nothing because of your lies." His breath caught when he noticed the last page, a marriage license. His name and Victoria's stared back at him, stark against the paper. It was dated weeks before the wedding, far earlier than he'd known. On the desk lay an old leather-bound diary. Alex hesitated, then opened it. Victoria's entries revealed a calculated plan to trap Alex in a marriage that would fulfill her ultimate goal of settling old scores. "I will take everything from him, just as his father did to me. He will be my pawn." Alex froze as the door creaked behind him. "Enjoying yourself?" Victoria's voice cut through the shadows like ice. He spun around, guilt and fear etched across his face. "Victoria, You thought you'd find answers here?" She stepped into the room, her silhouette sharp against the dim light from the hall. "Curiosity killed the cat, Alex." "What do you think you're doing?" His voice was low but firm. "Why did you really marry me? Is this about my father? Is this some kind of revenge?" Victoria's eyes hardened, her composed facade cracking. "It's not your place to ask questions, Alex. Just do what you're told, and you'll leave this marriage better off than you started. Isn't that enough for you?" Alex's fists clenched. "Enough? You've lied to me, manipulated me. This isn't a marriage, it's a trap." Victoria's lips curled into a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A trap, is it? Maybe you should have thought twice before signing those papers." She stepped closer, her tone venomous. "You may think you're smart, Alex, but you're just like your father, blind to the damage you cause until it's too late." Alex glared at her, the weight of his father's legacy crushing him anew. "If you hated him so much, why take it out on me? I had nothing to do with what he did to your family." Victoria stared at him for a long moment, the silence stretching like a taut string. Finally, she turned on her heel. "You're in over your head, Alex. Stay out of matters that don't concern you." With that, she left the room, her footsteps echoing down the hall. Later that night, Alex lay awake in bed, his mind racing. Victoria's words haunted him, along with the documents and diary. Why had she gone to such lengths to entangle him in her schemes? Was it truly just about revenge? His thoughts were interrupted by Victoria's voice drifting through the walls. He slipped out of bed and crept toward her study, pressing his ear against the door. "Make sure the transfer is complete," Victoria said, her tone sharp and commanding. "We can't let him back out now. Time is running out." Alex's blood ran cold. Whatever was happening, he was far deeper than he'd ever imagined. In the grand library, Alex sat alone, his mind a whirlpool of fear and confusion. Victoria's cryptic words and the damning contents of the locked room made it clear. He was trapped. The once imposing estate now felt like a gilded prison, its luxurious trappings concealing dark secrets. That evening, Alex approached Mr. Thompson, the estate's head butler, whose calm demeanor suggested he'd seen and heard more than he let on. "Mr. Thompson, I need your help. Something isn't right here." The older man regarded him with a steady gaze, his hands clasped behind his back. "I was wondering how long it would take before you came to me. You know something, don't you? About Victoria, about all of this?" Mr. Thompson hesitated before speaking. "You're not the first young man to be drawn into Victoria's world, Alex. She's clever, resourceful, and ruthless when it comes to her goals. My advice, watch your back." Alex's chest tightened. "Why are you still here if you know what she's capable of?" Mr. Thompson's expression softened, a flicker of regret passing across his face. "Some of us don't have the luxury of walking away." Determined to find a way out, Alex began devising a plan. He reached out to a trusted friend from law school, Jake, under the guise of catching up. "Hypothetically, if someone signed a contract under coercion or false pretenses, is there any way to avoid it?" Alex asked. "It depends on the evidence." "Why, are you in some kind of trouble?" Jake replied. "Just a class project I'm working on." "Thanks, man," Alex deflected. Over the next few days, Alex carefully searched Victoria's office whenever she was away, hoping to uncover something that could explain her obsession with his father. Late one night, as he rifled through her desk, he found an envelope addressed to his father. Inside was a scathing letter written by Victoria herself. It accused Alex's father of embezzlement, fraud, and deceit that had led to the financial ruin of Victoria's family and ultimately her husband's death. "You left us with nothing. My husband's heart couldn't take the stress, and he's gone because of you. I will see to it that your family pays for what you've done." Alex's stomach churned. Victoria's actions weren't just about reclaiming her fortune, they were about revenge fueled by years of pain and anger. Returning the letter to its hiding place, Alex resolved to act. He couldn't allow Victoria to use him as a tool for her vendetta. That night he began mapping out possible escape routes from the estate, but Victoria's sharp instincts caught wind of his unease. The next morning she found him in the breakfast room, her icy presence cutting through the quiet. "You've been busy, haven't you?" Victoria said. Alex froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. "I don't know what you're talking about." Victoria smiled coldly. "Don't play coy with me, Alex. If you think you can outsmart me, you're sorely mistaken. I've dealt with far craftier opponents than you." Alex swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't know what you're accusing me of, but I'm not doing anything wrong." Victoria leaned closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "If you betray me, you'll wish you hadn't. Remember that." She straightened and left the room, leaving Alex to grapple with the growing realization that escape might be more dangerous than staying. But staying meant surrendering his life to Victoria's twisted plans, a fate he refused to accept. The air in the estate felt charged as Alex paced the library, the weight of his discovery pressing heavily on his shoulders. The private investigator he'd quietly hired had confirmed the devastating truth. Victoria's late husband, Charles Morgan, had been swindled by Alex's father in a fraudulent real estate deal that stripped the Morgan family of their fortune. Charles's death from a heart attack soon after was the final blow, leaving Victoria embittered and determined to exact revenge. Victoria's proposal to marry Alex had been more than a calculated plan to settle scores. It was a way to make his family suffer, even from beyond the grave. Alex clenched his fists, anger coursing through him. How could she blame him for his father's sins? But as much as he resented Victoria's actions, he couldn't deny the pain that had driven her. That evening, Alex met his law school friend Jake in secret. Together, they compiled the evidence Alex had collected from Victoria's office and the investigators' findings. Among the documents, they discovered Victoria's involvement in current business dealings that bordered on illegal, shady partnerships and falsified reports designed to rebuild her empire at any cost. "This is enough to take her down, but you need to be careful," Jake warned. "If she realizes you're onto her, there's no telling what she might do." Alex nodded grimly. "She's already done enough damage. It's time to end this." The next morning, Alex waited in the grand sitting room, the evidence tucked securely in his bag. When Victoria entered, her icy composure intact, he stood to face her. "We need to talk," he said firmly. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? What could possibly be so urgent?" Alex pulled out the documents. "I know everything about my father, about Charles, about what you've been doing to rebuild your fortune." For the first time, Victoria's calm exterior faltered, her eyes flicking to the papers in Alex's hand. "You've been snooping again, haven't you? Do you even understand what your father did to my family?" Alex stepped closer, his voice rising. "I understand that he wronged you, but what about the people you've hurt along the way? What about me? I didn't do anything to deserve this." Victoria's jaw tightened. "And my family deserved to lose everything? My husband deserved to die of stress and heartbreak while your father lived comfortably? Don't talk to me about fairness, Alex." Alex's hands shook as he held up the evidence. "Revenge won't bring him back, Victoria, and it won't undo what happened. You've spent your life consumed by this, hurting innocent people, ruining lives. When does it end?" Victoria's shoulders sagged slightly, and for a fleeting moment, Alex thought he saw something close to regret in her eyes. "You remind me of him, you know, Charles," she said softly. "That same fire, that same stubbornness. I didn't expect to feel anything for you, Alex, but here we are." Alex hesitated, caught off guard by her admission. "If you really feel that way, then stop this. Let it go before it's too late." Before Victoria could respond, the sound of car tires crunched on gravel outside the estate. Moments later, uniformed police officers entered the room, followed by Jake. "Victoria Morgan, you're under arrest. We have a warrant charging you with multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy." Victoria's face hardened as she looked from the officers to Alex. "You called them?" Alex met her gaze, his voice steady. "You left me no choice." As the officers led Victoria away, she turned back to Alex one last time. "You may think you've won, Alex, but revenge isn't so easily undone. Be careful it doesn't consume you too." Alex watched her go, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over him. He had exposed the truth and protected himself, but Victoria's parting words weighed heavily on him. Was she right? Would the shadow of their shared past ever truly fade? The gavel's sharp bang echoed through the courtroom, marking the end of Victoria Morgan's trial. Alex sat quietly in the back row, watching as his former wife, once so commanding, faced the consequences of her actions. Despite everything, his testimony had helped reduce her sentence, not out of sympathy, but from a deep understanding of their complicated shared story. Victoria turned briefly in her seat, her gaze meeting Alex's for the first time. There was no trace of the cold calculation that had defined her before. Instead, she offered a faint, almost apologetic nod. Days later, Alex was summoned to the estate one final time. The grand house, once intimidating, now stood as a symbol of redemption and forgiveness. Alex's story shows us that, even in the face of betrayal and hardship, our choices can lead to healing and new beginnings. If this story touched your heart and left you inspired, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends and loved ones. Let's spread this message of hope and second chances, And if you haven't already, subscribe to Whispers of the Soul for more heartfelt tales that remind us of the power of compassion, forgiveness, and love. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with another Whispers of the Soul story. Until then, take care and remember to cherish the lessons life brings.